If you know me well, you know I wish God had a better public relations department. If I were to go on the street right now and ask people how they would define God, I don't know that I would hear my rock, my refuge, or my strength. Sometimes in this region of the country, if we credit our faith or God at times, sometimes people think we've lost our mind. Many of my peers have trouble having faith in anything, institutions, relationships, and they're skeptical of God and most definitely churches. On Wednesday night, I was thinking about that as I was about to post something on my personal Facebook page. I was going to share an interview, and I did share an interview, with Antoinette Tuff. She is the bookkeeper at the Georgia Elementary School, credited with saving the lives of over 800 school children and the staff this week when an armed gunman came in to her school office. Now, she wasn't supposed to be sitting at that desk at that time. Someone else was supposed to be, but on this day, the bookkeeper was sitting at that desk. And within less than 15 minutes, the young man who came in with a drawn gun had surrendered to the police because of Antoinette Tuff. And she said in the interview she would not accept that she was a hero. She said, "I was praying the whole time for the shooter and to God." She said, all credit goes to God. All credit goes to God. She said that she referred to God as her anchor. That's how she was naming God, her anchor. And that's what she learned in church. God is her anchor. I could not, on my Facebook post, say this. I had to say on my Facebook post, this was a woman of faith. Because we're all changing the story whenever we show God as a loving, right here, right now, compassionate, non-judgmental God. And Antoinette, in another interview I saw, she said, "I hope they don't remember me. I hope they remember a God of action." She was preaching on CNN. And she did not know that I read in the commentary that this psalm is about a God of action. I picked this text months ago, but a God of action is here every day. And now you might say, "Hey, but Christina, where was God in Newtown? And where is God in Syria? And where is God in my life? And where is God in Egypt?" And I have to say, there's a lot of mystery in this world, and there's a lot of suffering, and there's a lot of tragedy as much as there is hope. And we will never know all the answers. But a phrase that comes back to me a lot of times when I think about the suffering is from a sermon a pastor in Bronxville Reformed Church said after his son committed suicide a few years back. On one of his first sermons back, he said, "God will get you out of nothing. He will get you through anything. God will get you out of nothing. He will get you through anything." I have to say that my experience of God changed once I started a regular prayer practice. Faith moved from something someone else had defined to me to my own relationship. Our faith might have been taught to us by our grandmothers, or it might be something we cringe a little bit when it's mentioned on cable TV. But there is a point in all of our lives when faith can become our own and when we define it. It happened for me when I realized how uncertain life is. And for some of us, uncertainty happens when we're children. For some of us, when we first leave home. A part of being human is living with uncertainty. Our uncertainties may range from our health diagnosis we didn't see coming, to living as freelance artists without knowing where the next grant or the next job will be, or allowing ourselves to love again when we have known heartbreak. When I was a junior in college in the late 1990s, I was an exchange student in Nairobi, Kenya. And Nairobi has some nicknames about its high crime because it's so rampant there. And the reason why it's so rampant there, or some of the reasons why it's so rampant there, is because there's no public education for kids K through 12. There's no public system for orphans. The economy is pretty dismal. And so while we were there were 14 exchange students. And all of us either experienced being mugged or in a car accident or being hospitalized. And I can tell you, I never in my life before knew that uncertainty was just the norm. And when uncertainty became the norm in my life, I was praying all the time. I wanted to always look like I know what I'm doing, even if I have no idea. And so I would walk everywhere praying for everything, all the time. Faith changed from a noun into a verb. Prayer is what anchored me. When I returned to the States, I have kept that prayer practice up because it might not be as in our face here in the United States, but uncertainty is the norm most days we live. Since 2006, I've had a weekly prayer partner, and each week we pray 2 questions. Where do you see God? And where do you want to see God? And then the other person prays over us. And when you do it for 7 years, you see each other through a lot. I want to give you some examples of what I learned from my prayer partner, Katie. Hi, Katie. She's watching in Arizona. Because it's sometimes easier to see God through another person's life than our own. In the 7 years we have prayed, we've seen each other through internships, graduations, new jobs, unemployment, heartbreak, finding new love, hospitalizations and medical setbacks, and we've also lived into our dream jobs. So there's a lot God can handle in that. A few years ago, Katie was a graduate student, and she needed to move every 3 months to a new Western city. And she said to me, Christina, I'd like to see God in rent for under $300 or less. And I smiled, because I didn't really believe God was going to deliver that. But it's on the phone, so she can't see me. And over the course of a year, Katie got housing in San Diego, California, Portland, Oregon, Sedona, Arizona, Flagstaff, Arizona, for $300, $250, $100, and free. Boop. God of action. Don't let it limit you. I haven't prayed it because I'm afraid it won't happen, but maybe I should start praying it. At the same time, Katie has experienced some brain injuries. So in 2008 and 2010, she had brain injuries from bike accidents. And I have prayed for wholeness and healing for a few years now. And there's times where I wonder, do you hear me? Does it matter? Because she is 30 and bright and shiny, and when you talk to her, you feel like you could follow her anywhere in the world. That's kind of the charisma she has, and you would never know she must work 3 days a week for 4 hours a day because of the fatigue she still experiences and because of how her vision and hearing is still impacted. And at the same time, when I cry out to God, hey, didn't you hear those prayers for healing? Other things in her life have come up, because when you go through some kind of loss or trauma, often in your life what comes up is memories of past loss and trauma that might have been a little hidden to you. And those have been absolutely healed. So it's amazing to me how those prayers were answered, but not in the place that I thought it would be. She doesn't go to church anymore, and she doesn't go into restaurants because the volume is too loud. And she'll get intense migraines and intense fatigue. And so she came back last weekend from a 3-day Buddhist retreat. And she said to me, Christina, it's amazing. I've been going 3 years in a row now, and I can tell you what the difference is. 3 years ago, I walked with 2 walking sticks, and I was napping most of the day. Last year, I walked with 1 walking stick, and I took some naps. That last weekend, when I was sick with a cold, I went to all the programming and no walking sticks. So healing and God's answering prayers doesn't always appear to us on our timetable. But it does happen. There are times when she gets on the phone and her voice is really slurred because of the fatigue or a migraine. And then we go into prayer, and it's like everything's changed. Her voice is normal again. And there's this deep peace and presence in her voice. And I think to myself, I just experienced a small miracle, just in the tone of how her voice changes. There's a lot of things we can pray for, Middle. I mean, many, many things. But I was inspired by a Sweet Honey in the Rock song called Danko. And years ago, I had the opportunity. Danko comes from a West African country, and it's the story of a woman who wants to have a child and is having trouble having a child. And then she does get pregnant, and then she gives birth, and then the prayers continue after the baby's born. And I was talking to a member of Sweet Honey in the Rock about that song, trying to understand this concept of praying for those not yet born, because that was a new idea to me. And she said, in African cosmology, there are the ancestors, there are those living, and there are those not yet born. We must pray for the not yet born, because it's those prayers that will bring them successfully into this world. She said that some of the problems that she thinks exist occur because we've stopped praying for the unborn children, and we've stopped praying for our children. So because of her words, I started praying for the people I know in my life who want to have children. I pray for their unborn children. One of my friends' names is Yelda, and we're the same age. And one of her dreams has always been to have a family. So I'd pray for her unborn children. In January of 2011, I was working at Columbia at the time, and I was walking down the stairs of Low Library outside, and I see there's a voicemail from Yelda. And I could tell in the tone of her voice that I needed to sit down. She was supposed to give birth any day to her second child. And I hadn't heard Yelda cry before, but I could tell she'd been crying for a long time. And I sat down and listened to the voicemail message. And during labor, the baby had passed. Like there was a heartbeat, and then there wasn't. And she knew she was giving birth to a baby who'd already passed. And I called and emailed everyone I knew who had a regular prayer practice, and I said, pray for Yelda and her family. Pray for them now, because I can't even imagine that kind of heartbreak. And please, I said please. And then through God's grace, she was pregnant again within the next year. And that pregnancy, she was in and out of the hospital a lot, and the umbilical cord would get wrapped around the baby's neck, and then it would not be wrapped around, and be wrapped and not wrapped. And it was a time of great roller coaster ride. And the following winter, I got a text in 2012 from Yelda. She said, I want to quote it. She said, I'm in labor, so say a big prayer for the baby. And a few minutes later, I get another text from Yelda, and she says, you can come to triage, the nurses said. And I just paused, and I was like, I don't think that text is meant for me. That text is probably meant for her husband, and she's in labor, and she didn't realize it was meant for me. But I was afraid maybe it was meant for me, since it was sent to my cell phone. So I went into my boss's office, which is Jackie Lewis at the time, and I was pretty much near tears. And I said, can I please go to the hospital where my friend is in labor? And Jackie said, of course. And I prayed with Yelda briefly, and then I went down into the chapel at Roosevelt Hospital. And if you've ever been there, on one side is this place. One end is where all the Christian symbols are. There's a cross and chairs and a Bible. And on the other end is a Jewish side. And then on the side is a screen where Muslims can pray. And Yelda's Muslim, her husband's Jewish, and I'm Christian. So I first went to the Jewish side because I don't usually go into too many Jewish temples. And I sat down and I prayed for everything I could imagine in that room. I prayed for Yelda's strength and Yelda's body. I prayed for that baby have the courage. I prayed for all the doctors and that they were at their best that day. I prayed for all the relationships in the room. Prayed for the everything I could think of was prayers. And when I ran out of prayers, I just kept praying again. And at one time, while I was down there, a doctor came in blue scrubs, a black woman with tennis shoes. And at this time, I was sitting in the Christian section. And she walked right in the room, and she walked directly to the cross. And the cross was about 1.5 feet high. And she grabbed it. And she just was in fierce prayer. And I looked at her, and chills went down my body. And I thought to myself, what are we holding on to? What is anchoring us? Because this uncertainty is always going to happen at different levels. And then after about 2 hours, I think I had enough to say. I felt like this is good. I don't know what else to say. So I left the chapel and I was walking to the elevator, and I get a text from Yelda's husband, and he said, Christina, are you still here? And I said yes, and text, and he said, the baby's been born. Come and meet him. I will remember that day for the rest of my life. I was so glad, so happy to feel all those prayers come to life. And Yelda said, those doctors were amazing. And the pain was much less than the first time. I bring up the metaphor of pregnancy. I bring up pregnancy as a metaphor because we are all in our lives trying to give birth to something. We might not be called to raise children, or we may be, but all of us have something inside of us that is aching to be born. And if you've noticed, a lot of times, giving birth to that dream isn't easy. Uncertainty is part of the path. But God, Middle Church, is your anchor. God is your strength. God is your rock. Rock is the most used metaphors in all of the Psalms. Rock. You will create your stories, your own stories about your own faith, about who God is to you, and talk to God anytime, because God hears you. It does not matter. It does matter. It does matter that you take time to talk to God. Give God that which you're so gripping, that's which you're holding on to in your mind or in your heart, and let God hold it as you hold on to God. God's listening, and God will act. Not on our timetable, but faith is a verb, and God is always with you. Prayers are healing for your life, for the lives of your friends. They just saved 800 school children in Atlanta. for our communities, and for our nation. Nothing is too big or too small. To God be the glory. Amen.